Stone Brothers production.
Hello subscribers and new viewers, welcome back to our serial killer series from states A through Z. The state we're covering next is Louisiana, so let's get right into the list. Number 5. Daniel Blank.
Blank was born in 1962 and he was one of 8 children growing up. Blank dropped out of school after the 8th grade. Blank was hit by a vehicle when he was 12 years old while riding a bike. A little after Blank's accident, he was diagnosed with mild brain dysfunction. Blank's first murder was committed on October 17, 1996, being 41-year-old Victor Rossi. He was beaten to death in his home in Saint Amant, Louisiana. Blank worked for Rossi at his car repair shop. On March 18, 1997, he stabbed to death 58-year-old Barbara Bourgeois, a quarter mile from Blank's home. On April 10, 1997, 71-year-old Lillian Phillip failed to pick up her sister-in-law for a religious retreat together. Around 8:30 a.m. on the same day, another family member went to check on Lillian and they found her vehicle in the driveway. They noticed that the door to her house was unlocked with the alarm system being deactivated. The family decided to call the police after realizing that someone could have harmed her. When police arrived at Phillip's home, they found Phillip's body at the foot of her bed. A broken trophy was found right next to her head, along with a bloody knife right next to the bed. Authorities during that time put Phillip's murder with a string of murders around her area. Blank beat and bludgeoned to death 3 more people in the month of May 1997. His first 2 victims were Mr. and Mrs. Arcury in their Laplace home on the 9th of May, with both being bludgeoned to death. The last victim in the month of May was 55-year-old Joan Brock. She was beaten to death in the backyard of her Laplace home. On July 7, 1997, there was an attempted murder at the home of Leonce and Joyce Millett, both being 66 years old. The couple was beat and shot in their home, but both of them survived thankfully. They helped authorities by providing details for a sketch drawing of the unknown suspect. Authorities and FBI task force believe that the man in the sketch was the suspect who had been committing most of the murders around the same area starting back in late 1996. On November 13, 1997, Blank was arrested at his business called Daniel's Automotive. Blank's girlfriend was arrested days after him and was charged with 5 different murder charges. Her charges were dropped after agreeing to testify about Blank's killing spree. He complied with authorities and he was brought to the Onalaska Courthouse Annex. He was then questioned for 12 hours, first about his spending habits and then later asked about his murders. Blank denied any involvement in the murders for 3 hours of questioning. After that, he had a 2.5-hour interview under polygraph examination. The polygraph examination suggested that he was untruthful in many of their questions asking him about the murders. Detective Heimel entered the room later and gave a long speech about the recent death of Blank's mother. This made the defendant a little emotional and he slowly started to confess of the murders. First, he confessed to the murder of Joan Brock back in May of 1997. Blank then confessed to multiple murders, including the murder of Lillian Phillip. His confession was videotaped and it was shown to the jury along with the evidence. In September 1999, Daniel Blank received a death sentence for the murder of Lillian Phillip. On April 11, 2000, Blank received his second death sentence for the murder of Joan Brock. In 2001, he received 3 life penalties with no chance of parole for the murders of Barbara Bourgeois, Sam, and Luella Arcury. For almost 2 decades, he has been trying to overturn most of his convictions, but he was denied multiple times.
Number 4. Axeman of New Orleans. From May 23, 1918 to October 1919, the people of New Orleans feared for their lives from an unknown serial killer dubbed Axeman. The Axeman of New Orleans first struck on May 23, 1918, attacking an Italian grocer named Joseph Maggio and his wife, Catherine. The killer went into the couple's apartment, which was located above their grocery store, while they were sleeping. The Axeman slit the Maggios' throats with a straight razor while they were asleep, and then bashed their heads in with an axe. When police were investigating the crime scene, they found bloody clothes from the assumed suspect. Also, authorities ruled out a robbery because all their money and valuables were left out in plain sight. Investigators questioned several people, but they were all released for lack of evidence. About a month after the first crime, another couple was attacked by the unknown Axeman in the early hours of June 27, 1918. Louis Bessumer, who was a grocer, and his mistress, Harriet Lowe, lived in a few rooms in the back of their grocery store. Basumer was hit in the right side of his temple, which resulted in a possible skull fracture. Lowe was hacked over her left ear, and police found her unconscious. The couple was discovered shortly after 7 a.m. on the same day of the attack by John Zanka, who was a driver of a bakery wagon doing his routine delivery. Zanka found the couple in a puddle of their own blood that was coming out of their heads. The axe, which belonged to Basumer, was found in the bathroom of the apartment. Basumer later stated that he was sleeping when he had his head bashed in by the axe. After the attack, one side of her face was partially paralyzed and she had surgery on August 5th to try to fix it. Unfortunately, she died 2 days after the surgery. Before she died, she had told the police that she was a suspect and it was her lover, Louis Basumer, that had attacked her because of a scandal. Later, Basumer was charged with the crime, serving only 9 months in prison, but he was acquitted on May 1st, 1919 after a 10-minute jury deliberation. On August 5th, a third similar attack happened on 28-year-old Miss Edward Snyder, who was 8 months pregnant. She woke up to a dark figure standing over her, who hit her in the face repeatedly. A little after midnight, she's found by her husband, who was returning home from work, and saw her scalp cut open with her face covered in blood. Fortunately, Snyder survived the attack, giving birth to a healthy baby girl, which was 2 days after the attack. Her husband told the police that nothing was stolen from the home besides $6 or $7 that were in his wallet. The windows and doors of the apartment didn't appear to have been forced open. Authorities concluded that Snyder was attacked with a lamp that was on the table earlier. James Gleason, who police said he's an ex-convict and was arrested shortly after the crime, but he is released because of lack of evidence. Just 5 days later, yet another grocer, a man named Joseph Romano, was attacked while staying at his two nieces' houses. Pauline and Mark awoke to noises in a nearby room, where their uncle Romano was staying. The girls entered his room, finding Romano seriously injured with big blows to his head, and they saw the suspect running away. Even though Romano was seriously injured, he was able to walk to the ambulance once his two nieces returned home. Unfortunately, he died 2 days later due to severe head trauma. The girls provided a brief description of the killer, who was a dark-skinned overweight man who was wearing a dark suit and a hat. Other clues of the crime were like earlier crimes, with nothing being stolen, with most of the victims being Italian. Also, the unknown suspect would use weapons from the victims' homes. D'Antonio, a retired detective, described the previous homicides were similar to Romano's murder and stated the killer could have dual personalities. On the night of March 10th, 1919, after a slight absence from the killer, he struck again. The victim is Charles Cortimiglia, who is an immigrant that lived with his wife, Rosie, and his infant daughter, Mary, in Gretna, Louisiana. On the night of March 10th, screams were heard coming from their residence, and a grocer, Orlando Giordano, rushed across the street to see what happened. Upon his arrival, Jordan noticed that Cortimiglia family were all attacked by the unknown assailant. Rosie had stood in the doorway with a severe head wound, holding her deceased daughter, and Charles was laying on the floor, bleeding a lot. They were all sleeping together, and the baby was in the mother's arms. The daughter was hit with a single blow to the back of the neck, killing her immediately. The couple suffered skull fractures, but they both survived the attack. The place was yet again left with nothing stolen, and a bloody axe was found on the back porch of their home. Josie falsely accused Giordano and Charles of murder because of jealousy and personal things they were going through. Fortunately, they were released from jail because of lack of evidence for murder charges. After the Cortimiglia family crime, authorities stated that all the crimes happened were committed by one person. They described the killer as a bloodthirsty maniac filled with passion for slaughtering people to death. 3 days after the attack, on March 13th, 1919, the unknown axemen sent a long letter with a part of it saying that they never caught me and never will. Also, the suspect stated, "When I see it fit, I shall come and claim other victims." He then stated that I never left any clues, except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains, whom I sent below to leave me company. There is much more to the letter, but I'll leave it in the text in the video so you can pause to read it. Stephen Bocco was his next victim, being a grocer too, following the same pattern. He was attacked by an axe-wielding intruder in his bedroom while he was sleeping on August 10th, 1919. Bocco woke up in the night to a dark figure next to his bed. He awoke shocked, running outside into the streets to investigate, but realized that his head was cracked open. Bocco then ran to a neighbor's home named Frank Janusa, where he lost consciousness and passed out. Nothing was taken yet again, and a panel on the back door of the victim's home was chiseled away, like his previous crimes. Bocco survived his injuries, but couldn't remember any details of the incident. Sarah Lawman was the 11th victim when she was attacked on the night of September 3rd, 1919. Neighbors came to check on the young woman, who lived alone, and broke into the home when she didn't respond. They discovered the 19-year-old lying passed out on her bed, suffering a terrible head injury and missing many teeth. The killer entered her apartment through an opened window and attacked the woman with an axe. The bloody axe was left again, like the previous crimes, on the grass in front of the apartment building. Lawman survived the attack, not remembering anything from the attack. Grocer Mike Pepitone was the serial killer's last victim on the night of October 27th, 1919. His wife was awakened by a noise and went up to the door of his bedroom, seeing an axe-wielding man leaving the scene. Mike was struck in the head and was covered in his own blood. Blood splatter covered most of the room, including a painting they have of the Virgin Mary. His wife, being a mother of 6 children, was unable to describe any features of the killer. Unfortunately, Mike died and was considered by many being last of the suspect's murders. Press reporters during the peak of public panic about similar murders that happened as early as 1911, but recently researchers have called these reports questionable. The suspect was never identified, and the murders remain unsolved to this day. Number 3. Nathaniel Robert Code Jr. Nathaniel Code Jr. was born on March 12, 1956, in Shreveport, Louisiana. When Nathaniel was in his 20s, he was already in serious trouble with the law when he was sent to prison on an aggravated rape conviction where he stayed until 1984. While in prison, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by 2 doctors and was placed on the medication called Haldol. He returned to his hometown upon his release, got married, and lived the role of a transformed con who turned his life around. Though this is not the case, and he began to kill soon after his release while under the radar from law enforcement. On August 31st, 1984, it was not long after he had left prison when he killed his first victim, who was 25-year-old Deborah Ford. Deborah's home was invaded by Code when he entered the house through a bathroom window. Nathaniel bounded Deborah up with an electrical cord and gagged her. Soon after she was stabbed 18 times, Nathaniel cut her throat so deep that she was nearly decapitated. He was a resident in Deborah's area and was one of many people that crowded outside when police set up crime scene tape the day her body was discovered. About almost a year later, July 19, 1985, he killed again when he gained entrance by forcing open the back door to 4 people who were found dead the next morning. Billy Joe Harris was shot twice in the head, twice in the chest, and his throat had been slashed with blunt force. He had been bound by his shoelaces and telephone cords. Jerry Colbert was fatally shot at close range in the head while sleeping. Vivian Cheney's body was bound with electrical cord and draped over a bathtub where she was forced to drown to death. She was also beaten and strangled while young Carlitha Colbert was found in the living room, also bound with electrical cord. She was also brutally slashed around her throat. Code spared the lives of Cheney's youngest girls, ages 10 and 7. Everyone in the home was either mentally retarded or visually impaired except for Harris. A jogger that knew Code later remembered seeing him on the night of the murders coated in blood. Code soon made a mistake, breaking the rule of a serial killer by murdering someone close to him. He murdered his grandfather, who was found dead in his home on August 5, 1987. He also killed Eric Williams, age 8, and Joe Robinson, age 12, who were 2 grandsons of a friend who often stayed with him. Code's grandfather was bound with electrical cord and gagged while being stabbed 13 times and beaten to death. Williams was discovered in a guest bedroom, strangled to death. Robinson was beaten and strangled to death alongside Williams, who was in the living room. Robinson had bruises on top of his shoulders, suggesting a forced sexual assault which had been attempted by Code. Both boys are found in their underpants, bound and gagged, which also suggests foul play. A neighbor of Code's grandfather witnessed Nathaniel leaving his residence on the evening of the murders. It was well known that Code was not welcome at his grandfather's home. Code himself admitted he was at the home late that night. It didn't take detectives and crime scene investigators long before connecting him with fingerprints that matched those lifted from the Cheney murder scene. At this point, Code's luck ran out and he was incarcerated for multiple homicides. Nathaniel Code was tried and convicted in the 4 Cheney slangs. He was sentenced to death for his crimes. Eventually, he was also convicted in Ford's murder, which was never put to trial for the murder of his grandfather, Joe Eric Williams. He has been on death row since 1989 and is still attempting for an appeal. Number 2. Sean Vincent Gillis. There's little known about Gillis's early life except that he was the son of Yvonne and Norman Gillis. He was born in Baton Rouge on June 24, 1962, and raised in southern Louisiana. Sean's mother stated that he was a well-behaved, happy child who did well in school and had friends like a normal child should. He is far from that, and his rap sheet began in 1980 when he was just 17 years old. Though his crime only indicated minor infractions, and little would help indicate the killer he would become. Throughout the years, Gillis was arrested for traffic citations, DUI, possession of marijuana, and contempt of court. Gillis started killing due to stress, as he once stated himself. Gillis committed his first murder in 1994 when he broke into a small retirement home of 82-year-old Ann Bryan during the early morning hours. Sean intended to rape the elderly white woman, but she began screaming and would not stop until he cut her throat with a foot-long hunting knife. As Ann was lying there bleeding to death, Gillis allegedly stabbed her continuously around the body region. Nearly 5 years had passed before Gillis built up the need to kill once again. He told a reporter after his arrest he waited so long to kill his next victim because he was happy in his given situation. During this time off, he worked at a convenience store located across from the street of Ann Bryan's home and lived in a small ranch-style house on Bergen Avenue. The house of Ann Bryan belonged to her mother that they both lived in from the time Gillis was a teenager. Gillis's neighbors didn't like him and were afraid of him, particularly girls and women. Neighbors thought he was strange, and one neighbor was even peeped on by Gillis through a bedroom window. He was also often seen in the front lawn of his house yelling at the moon, in between yelling curses at his mother. Gillis's next victim was 30-year-old Catherine Hall. Hall was a black drug addict who resided in a housing project on North Street, which is notoriously known for its drug dealers, pimps, addicts, and prostitutes. When Catherine climbed into Gillis's car on a cold, chilly night, he overpowered her, placed a plastic cable tie around her neck, and choked her. Afterward, Gillis slashed her throat and stabbed her in the left eye. He then raped Catherine, mutilated her lifeless body, and dumped her remains in a rustic area east of Baton Rouge Parish, which was in front of a dead-end road sign. Investigators figured he dumped her in front of a dead-end road sign because it was supposed to be symbolic in nature. After 4 months, while trawling for a victim, Gillis saw Smith, a 52-year-old mother of 3, out for a morning jog in a wealthy neighborhood of South Baton Rouge. He waited another 3 weeks before planning to seize his opportunity on May 30th at approximately 6:30 a.m. Gillis ran Smith over with his car, which knocked and stunned her into a ditch. While Smith was dazed and confused, Gillis got out of his car, placed a heavy-duty cable around her neck, and began to choke her. Smith was under his complete control, so he shoved her into his car and took her to a nearby park where Gillis raped and murdered her. After mutilating her body with his hunting knife, he loaded her into the trunk of his car where Smith's nude body remained overnight and drove home. She was found about 35 miles from Baton Rouge near St. James Parish by a bicyclist who found her body the next day. Gillis killed 3 more women during late 1999 to late 2000. He severed one leg off 36-year-old Joyce Williams. Then both Lillian Robinson and Marilyn Nevels were found nude and decomposing. Sean took a significant break from killing for about a year. He noticed that there were more women being raped and killed around town, so he soon realized that there was another competitor. 3 or more women around Sean's area continued to die, and it was not his work. By August 2002, the Baton Rouge Police Department acknowledged that they had severe problems on their hands and that they needed to do something about it. The department formed a task force to focus their efforts on a killer, but they knew they had a second serial killer at work. Police at this time did not know that Sean Gillis was a suspect in the murder of their earlier known victims. They would later learn about him spending the greater part of his days on the internet, keeping track of the work of his competitor. His competitor, 34-year-old Derek Todd Lee, was linked with the 7 of the murders through DNA. Gillis is so intrigued by Derek's work that he had a document on his computer's hard drive that was named DTL, which were Derek Lee's initials. He had photos and news articles about Derek Lee's case so that he could follow the investigation carefully and not be outdone by him. In late October 2003, he crossed the path of 45-year-old Johnny Mae Williams, who was a divorced mother of 3, prostitute, and drug addict. In this case, Gillis had been friends with Williams over 10 years, which is not a regular path that a serial killer takes. She was driven to a secluded area where he beat, raped, strangled, and finally mutilated her body with a knife. This time around, however, he positioned his victim in various positions and photographed her. His last victim was 43-year-old Donna Johnston, who was a prostitute that was killed in February 2004. She was wasted when he picked her up, so it wasn't difficult to sway and force her into his car. Gillis then drove Johnston to a location near his home where he looped a cable around her neck and strangled her to death. It was later known that it took her 1.5 minutes for her to fall into unconsciousness and a tad longer for her to stop breathing. He had taken off all of Johnston's clothes, placed her limp body on the ground where he slashed both of her breasts and cut off her left nipple in the process. He continued to cut off Johnston's tattoo off her right thigh and detached her left arm starting at the elbow. Johnston's murder was without a doubt the most violent and gruesome process of Gillis's kills. After Gillis's arrest, he sent mail to Purpura, who was Johnston's friend, stating, "Your friend died quickly, and her last words were, 'I can't breathe.'" Johnston's friend died from complications of AIDS in August 2005, but not before she turned over Gillis's letters to the authorities. Gillis was arrested when his white Chevrolet Cavalier tire tracks were found where he dumped Johnston's body. Police arrested Gillis and took a swab from his mouth to associate the rest of his DNA with the other victims in the case. Police used a search warrant to find seized weapons, external hard drives, a scanner, photographs of Johnny Williams' body, and newspaper clippings for Derek Lee's murder case of Carrie Lynn. One of his computers also contained files named Best of Snuff, Beheadings, and Hangings, also including the Manson murders. Another file about Russian necrophilia was seized along with several books that were about serial killers. Sean Vincent Gillis confessed to killing and mutilating 8 women, 7 of whom he had been linked to with DNA evidence. Finally, after 4 long years of delays, he was sentenced to life in prison in August 2007. Number 1. Ronald Joseph Dominique, aka the Bayou Serial Killer. Dominique lived in a small bayou community of Thibodaux, Louisiana for most of his childhood. The community is located between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where everyone in the town knows a little about everyone who lives there. He attended the high school there, where he is in a glee club, and he sang in the chorus. Classmates made fun of Dominique during his teen years because of being homosexual, but he never admitted he was gay during that time. As he aged, he seemed to live 2 different lives, where part of him was helpful to his neighbors in trailer parks where he lived. The other side of Dominique would dress up in drag clothes, and did terrible impersonations of Patti LaBelle at the local gay club. Many people remembered him as someone they didn't like. Dominique would live with his mother or other relatives because he struggled financially most of his childhood. From 1985 to 2002, before being caught for murder in 2006, he had been arrested many times, racking up multiple charges. Some of his charges consisted of telephone harassment, drunk driving, and rape. In 1996, neighbors reported to authorities about an almost nude young man jumping out of a window from Dominique's home. The man then screamed for help in the streets, yelling out that Ronald tried killing him, and he was arrested shortly after. When his court date arrived, his accuser didn't show up, and he avoided convictions. One of his first victims was 19-year-old David Mitchell. His body was discovered in 1997 by authorities near Hahnville, Louisiana. Next victim was 20-year-old Gary Pierre, which was 6 months after killing Mitchell in St. Charles Parish. On July 1998, 38-year-old Larry Ranson's body was found in St. Charles Parish. Over the next 9 years, more dead bodies of men with ages ranging from 19 to 40 would be found. The victims would be found in sugarcane fields, desolate bayous, and in random ditches around secluded areas. Authorities found that the 23 men who have been murdered had similarities and considered to be victims of a serial killer. The victims were mostly homeless men, many who used drugs and did prostitution. The victims were asphyxiated or strangled after being raped. Several of his victims were barefooted when found by authorities. After receiving tips, authorities had evidence against 42-year-old Ronald Dominique, arresting him on December 1, 2006. Days before his arrest, Dominique had moved from his sister's house into a homeless shelter in Houma, Louisiana. People who lived there described him as being odd, but they didn't expect him to be a killer. A little after his arrest, he confessed to raping and killing at least 23 men. Dominique said he'd lure homeless men for the promise of sex in exchange for money. He even would sometimes tell the men to have sex with his wife and then show a picture of an attractive woman. Dominique lied about being married, which led them into his home. He then asked them to be tied up, raping them afterward. Dominique mentioned he would murder them later to avoid being convicted and sentenced to prison for rape. In Dominique's statement to police, he said the men who refused to be tied up would leave his home unharmed. There is a case of someone who wanted to be anonymous who was unharmed a year ago, reporting the incident that leads up to Dominique's arrest. He committed his crimes in many towns in Louisiana, including Jefferson parishes in suburban New Orleans. Dominique was initially charged with 2 murders, but eventually he was indicted on 9 murder counts. Authorities are unclear if Dominique would be charged for the 14 other murders he confessed to. Dominique pleaded guilty to 8 murders in a deal to avoid the death penalty. On September 23, 2008, he was sentenced to 8 life sentences in prison for the 8 murders. Ronald Dominique is currently serving his life sentences at Louisiana State Penitentiary. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're enjoying this series, smash a big thumbs up on the video. Also, comment down below on which serial killer you thought was the worst. Share and spread the word of our videos because every little bit helps with the adpocalypse. Subscribe for more content like this and leave some suggestions below when it comes to new video ideas. Stay tuned for the next state, which is Maine, and have an awesome day. Peace out, guys.